We take a look ahead at future Israeli operations in Gaza. It looks like Hamas may have lied about manufacturing their own sniper rifles, and Secretary Blinken wonders why nobody is asking Hamas to lay down their arms. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 10:30 a.m. Central on Friday, December 22nd, 2023. For updated casualty information, you can find links in the description below to Al Jazeera publishing information from the Gaza Health Ministry, as well as the official IDF sources. Starting with operations on the ground, Israel says that so far they have killed 4 out of the 7 senior commanders of the Hamas Gaza City Brigade. The 3 that remain alive as targets is the commander of the brigade, Izz-ad-Din al-Ahad, the commander of the Zaytun Battalion, Ahmad Aslim, and the commander of the Al-Farkun Battalion, Jaber Hassan Aziz. Then the Ghazi Salafi jihadi organization called Jaish al-Umma, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, more on that in a second, they published their first announcement since October 7th, in which they said that their people took part in, and some were killed in the terrorist attack on October 7th into Israeli territory. Additionally, in this announcement, Jaish al-Umma says that their operatives have been fighting all around and continue to fight in the Gaza City area in the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. Additionally, in this proclamation, they call on lone wolves in the West Bank to go out and carry out attacks against the Jewish citizens there. Now, we've talked about this in the past, but the connections between Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Islamic State are tenuous at best. They are all Sunni organizations, but it kind of stops there in a lot of ways. So this group, the Jaish al-Umma, they have kind of affiliated themselves with Al-Qaeda. That's not necessarily a two-way street. We haven't seen a lot from major Al-Qaeda publications talking about their organization in Gaza, which, look, this Jaish al-Umma group is tiny, right? The last figure I saw was less than 50 operatives, fighters, or terrorists in the Gaza Strip, which is nothing compared to Palestinian Islamic Jihad or the Qassam Brigade's militant wing of Hamas. So they're there, but in very, very small numbers. This group actually in the past has also been critical of Hamas. And then when talking about the Islamic State, they just straight up hate Hamas, right? They call them apostates. So there's no love lost between those two organizations. So it can be tempting at times to try to group all of these, especially Sunni Islamic organizations together. They're just not. But in this case, there is a bit of an Al-Qaeda element popping their heads up during the ongoing war in Gaza. So there's a lot of questions about where this war is headed, and Israeli journalist Nadav Eyal put together something yesterday that I thought was worth running through. Keep in mind this is speculation, but it does kind of track with what we might expect to see going forward. So he said what he's hearing from senior Israeli officials about the war is that this is phase 2 of the war, which includes taking operational control of Gazan towns and neighborhoods, and this phase should end relatively soon. Now, it's worth noting that operational control is not the same as completely cleared, right? In a conventional war, you could expect to take a town and then there's no more fighting behind the front lines. When you factor in an insurgency type operation, even after you've cleared through a village or a town, so long as there's a civilian population, there is still going to be some sort of militant activity in the rear. In this situation, even with the civilian population completely removed from some of these portions of Gaza, given the tunnel networks underground, as Israel moves through and clears the above ground areas, they're still coming under fire from areas that they have moved through in the last few days or even weeks. He says phase 3 is expected to begin by mid to late January. The IDF will relocate in the north and center of Gaza, withdrawing from some areas. Israel will not allow the en masse return of the Palestinian population. The outlook is long-term, at least a year. I thought this was interesting because there's been a lot of talk recently, some pushback from the United States, kind of suggesting that Israel might want to wrap up this war sometime in the next month or two. And this is, when you look at sources inside of Israel, there's nobody there saying this war is going to end in the next month. If anything, it's months down the road. And here we are hearing that phase 3 will begin in mid to late January. In phase 3, he says the IDF will continue aerial assaults and ground raids aimed at killing Hamas leaders and crippling its infrastructure and command. Israel is also preparing a plan to undermine Hamas's control of funding and taxation across Gaza. That last piece has got to be just falling apart at this point, right? It's hard to imagine that there is a substantial funding and taxation program going on in Gaza right now with the volume of displaced people and the lack of really any economic activity all across the strip. But either way, that's a focus for phase 3. He says Israel will be open to limited pauses in fighting, even extended ones, to facilitate more hostage deals. It is willing to release substantial numbers of Palestinian prisoners and ensure safe passage for Sinwar and Hamas leadership to leave Gaza if they free the hostages and cease fighting. There's a lot to this. That's the first mention I've ever seen about Hamas leadership being given the ability to leave Gaza. I don't know if they would take him up on it. Hard to imagine that Israel would just allow Sinwar and some of the other, Mohammed Deif, some of the other Hamas leadership to just relocate somewhere like Qatar or Lebanon. Maybe this is just a fancy way of saying if Sinwar and some of the leaders surrender, we'll end the fighting. But anyways, I thought that was notable. Also, in terms of releasing substantial numbers of Palestinian prisoners, Israel is picking up new Palestinian prisoners left and right. So I want to say the number just in the West Bank is over 3,000 since October 7th, and it's well more than that in Gaza. So there's a lot of Palestinians that could be released in some sort of, not knowing what each one of them is being held for, but there's a lot of Palestinians in prison more since October 7th that could be a part of any one of these negotiated deals. He says the general mindset within the defense apparatus is to prevent further worsening of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, fearing it will limit Israel's legitimacy in targeting Hamas. This shouldn't be a surprise. This has been a thing from day one. The first bombs fell in Gaza, and there were organizations saying you got to stop harming civilians and you got to watch out for the civilian population. And every single civilian death, every destroyed home, every damaged hospital, everything like that is a challenge for Israel to continue hunting Hamas across Gaza. So hopefully that was a concern early on, but it's at least being brought up now. And then in wrapping up, he says all eyes are on the north, something we've talked about quite a bit here in recent videos. He says tens of thousands of Israelis are internally displaced due to the war Hezbollah initiated immediately after Hamas attacked. The general assessment in Israel is that the diplomatic attempts with Hezbollah will fail, and the chances of war are increasing. So we've said it in multiple videos as of late. Watch the north. It seems like the stage is really being set on both sides of the border for a larger scale conflict to kick off there sometime in the next few weeks or months. Hopefully that's wrong, but the pieces are kind of being aligned to allow that to happen. Then shifting over to Hamas, they've claimed responsibility for 14 attacks against Israeli forces in the past 24 hours. And then 2 days ago, they put out a video where they said they were manufacturing their own sniper rifles and loading their own ammunition inside of Gaza. I think they made it up. That might not be true at all. What do you know? So Forgotten Weapons here on YouTube did an interesting video that I'll link in the description below where he played this clip and just dispelled the whole thing. Said it's just completely for show, all made up. Look, I warned you. I said I have no idea when it comes to gunsmithing. And Hamas does manufacture some weapons and munitions inside of Gaza, and they have for a long time. So that's not really anything new. Qassam rockets are one. They built a lot of these. They're kind of small, short-range, very inaccurate rockets. They can be fired off of bipods or tripods into Israeli territory. But then they upped the game here, showing this gunsmithing room where they were supposedly manufacturing these 12.7 millimeter sniper rifles. Guess not. Thank you, Forgotten Weapons, for running that one down. Now, we're starting to get reports that Hamas rejected the terms put forward for the next potential ceasefire in Gaza. The rumored deal here. Remember, the details aren't going to come out because it wasn't agreed upon, so these are just the leaks that made it out into the public. The rumored deal is that all remaining women and children in Hamas's captivity would have been released, along with the elderly male hostages in need of medical attention. In return for that, Israel would halt air and ground operations in Gaza and allow increased aid into the Gaza Strip. Hamas put out a statement saying, quote, "We will not hold any form of talks over prisoner exchange under the continuation of the Israeli genocidal war. We are, however, open to any initiative that contributes to ending the aggression on our people," end quote. So Hamas, right now, in this round of negotiations, is not looking for a temporary ceasefire. They're looking to end the war entirely. That's their ask. That's their line in the sand as per this statement. We'll see if that holds, but they want this to be over. They want Israel to leave Gaza, move back into Israeli territory. I don't know if that's in the cards right now. And in a press conference here in the United States talking about that potential ceasefire, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken got a little heated during an exchange when he was pressed about the U.S. doing more to limit civilian casualties in Gaza. He said, quote, "I hear virtually no one demanding of Hamas that it stop hiding behind civilians, that it lay down its arms, that it surrender. This would be over tomorrow if Hamas does that. It would be good if there was a strong international voice pressing Hamas to do what is necessary to end this, end quote. And he's got a point. I mean, you just don't see that in the international media, people calling on Hamas to do their part, lay down their arms and end the fighting. I mean, as a comparison, when Russia kicked off their full-scale invasion of Ukraine roughly 2 years ago, from the opening days and weeks, there were voices, maybe not the most notable ones, but there were voices calling on Ukraine to negotiate a settlement, sue for peace, save the lives of all the Ukrainian people. Think of how many wouldn't die in this brutal war with Russia. I understand why Ukraine does not want to surrender and negotiate a settlement, giving up some of their territory to Russia. I also understand why Hamas and their leadership don't want to surrender to Israel. But there's nobody really asking Hamas to do that or pressing Hamas to do that anywhere near the amount that we're pressing Ukraine really from the get-go that they should give up some of their territory and surrender for the sake of the lives of their people. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos and is 20% off all annual plans from now until December 31st. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.